Caleb Williams to the 10, to the 5, touchdown! Junkins, here he goes. Breaking tackles, and look at the leg drive right to the end.
And Stroud throwing, this time is from Marvin Harrison Jr., and it's a trifecta of touchdowns for Harrison.
Welcome into the Saturday Air Raid. We are back. I'm your host, Johnny Roberts, and with me, as always, is my good friend, co-host, it's Brad Bolt.
How are we, mate? It's so good to be back. We had a little bit of a hiatus from this show. We've had a few things going on with everyone, but it's so good to get this back. Ready to go, ready for probably the most fun part of the NFL season, the draft.
I have very much missed this. If I could quote the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air for one moment, my life did get flipped, turned upside down last year. And I really wanted to continue doing, because we were off to such a huge start, such a great start this time last year, before the season kicked off last season. And I think a lot of people were excited to see what was going to come out of this. And then things outside of our control, outside of my control, kind of got in the way. But, the thing is, there's just so much talent. There's so much to talk about in this upcoming NFL draft that there's no way I couldn't not do it. So I'm glad that you're back here with me.
I've been looking forward to this. It's one of those things. I think this is how we all first sort of started to connect, was just conversing about draft prospects, and It brings it back around. Obviously, the first time that you guys came on a show was the last year when we did the first round watch along for the NFL draft, which was a heap of fun, and then it just became a regular thing where I enjoyed that 4 hours that we did, that I was like, I need to keep having you guys back on.
We never looked back, and then we did. But what I will say is we actually had a lot of good predictions and a lot of good insight and analysis from last off season that actually translated really well, especially some of our hot takes. I'm not sure if you remember. I know I had a couple of hot takes that translated really well. I
had some that did not translate so well. Jonathan Mingo.
Yeah. Well, my Tank Dell predictions all came to fruition.
They did.
My God, I'm hitting my camera. And CJ Stroud came to fruition, which I was really, really happy about. And what was the other one? I can't quite remember. But go back and listen. If you are new to this show, this is like a sort of like a Devi show from the NFL Lab Network, where we look at college players who are getting ready for the NFL draft and going into the NFL. And then we also look at them through their sort of rookie seasons, and then we send them on their way. And if you are familiar with the show, hi, Mum, welcome back. And it's just good to be getting back into this again as well. So if you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to this, because that really, really helps us out. And you can follow us on Twitter, or are we officially saying X, Brad?
I've not called it X once. It's been Twitter for me the entire time. So
thank you. You can follow Brad on Twitter at BradBolt1. You can follow me on Twitter at John Lloyd Roberts. And Dan's not here. I thought he might be. I didn't realize he was joking. He is at work. I actually took him seriously when he said he was going to work on his forklift and give us his Jayden Daniels takes. I was into it.
I would have thought this would have been. He could have worked this in, because he said, "Look, start of the season, I had Bo Nix as my QB3, and then he could chuck the forklift in reverse, and he could have had the beeping in the background. He could have gone, but I'm reversing, I'm backing up my take, and I've now moved him." But no, he's let us down. He's let us down.
Massively. Massively.
Dan,
he's going to need punishment for that.
Dan, when you listen to this, it's on you, buddy. You had a chance to make something really good out of this, and you've let us down.
Lost opportunity. Now, I'm really quickly trying to find... So for the first show back, what I wanted to do here is I wanted to take a quick look at the top quarterback prospects going into the NFL draft. We talked about them a lot before the season started last year. It was kind of interesting to look back on what we had and what we got right and wrong, particularly with myself. I think the only ones that aren't really applicable here are the guys who I thought might declare and who haven't. Drew Allah. That's actually kind of hard to say. Drew Allah. And then the other one was KJ Jefferson. I was really surprised KJ Jefferson did not declare.
And Quinn Ewers has also gone back to school as well.
And that was the big one because he's got some hot competition there in Texas. So I'm not sure what he must have transferred, right?
No, he's gone back to I think he's gone back to Texas, yeah, for his what feels like, I know it's not the case, but what feels like his 17th year in college.
But
It
that's
just
bold.
feels like he's been it feels like he's been around there for that long, but
yeah, well, I mean, so he was the number one prospect coming out of high school the year he came out, I'm pretty sure. And that's why everyone's heard his name for such a long time, because we've all just been waiting and waiting and waiting. And as we've been waiting, he's sort of been declining a little bit. I'll go through my top 10 that I had. So I had Caleb Williams, Drake May, Sam Hartman, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, Jordan Travis, JJ McCarthy, Quinn Ewers, Drew Allah, and KJ Jefferson. I think that the one that stands out the most, I would say, is not, I didn't even call out his name. It was Jayden Daniels, who obviously put on an absolute clinic this time for the season just gone, winning the Heisman Trophy as well. So we'll get to him in a moment. But Sam Hartman, I had pretty high expectations of him transferring from Wake Forest to Notre Dame, and he did not do too well. He sort of started the season okay against inferior opponents, and then as the season went on, he really, really struggled. So we'll see what happens to him in the NFL draft as well. Any thoughts before we kick off, Brad?
No, it's one of those things. You look back on this list, and majority of these guys that you had in the top 10 in August last year were probably close to this, similar positioning for some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them obviously risen, some fallen. Like I said, Jayden Daniels wasn't there. So it is one of those things that it's a lot of fun when you look in, and we'll probably look at it again this year or in August, try and predict our top 10 quarterbacks for next year's the next college season, and then see what happens the following year, because it is interesting to see how much people can, in our estimation, rise and fall, and where we might end up seeing them there.
And, to be honest, I probably should have had him here. And a few people had said, like, hey, you don't have Jayden Daniels. What's the deal? And I didn't really rate him at the time. I sort of thought he might be lightning in a bottle, but then he really put on a clinic. I mean, he had a lot of help from Malik Neighbors as well, and other various the other wide receiver who's just slipped my mind right now, who's also going to be very high, Brian Thomas, he had as well. So, it is really cool to see. And once we get to the wide receiver show, that's actually going to be really cool as well, because of how many receivers are linked to the quarterbacks that we're talking about as well. We're also, so I'm going to be doing this show every 2 weeks for now. And then once we get through the draft, we'll just sort of take a bit of a deep dive into these players. We'll see where they've landed. So actually, I should probably talk about that. So programming for the start of 2024. So we'll run through our favorite players at each position. We'll then run through our favorite college prospects leading up to this year. We'll talk about transfers, because the transfer portal is just such an insane part of college at the moment. And then once the NFL draft happens, we'll do a show on probably Brad's channel, and then we will talk about the landing spots. Again, we'll revisit this and we'll see where we're liking. And then hopefully, with any luck for fantasy purposes as well, you'll have a bit more information. So with that said, let's kick it off with our first quarterback prospect. For me, let's just go. We'll do this together, because I imagine we'll probably have fairly similar rankings here, particularly Caleb Williams, number one. Any qualms there, Brad?
No, I've got Caleb number one as well, but I can see the thought process behind why someone might have Drake May number one, because a lot of it can be. So Caleb Williams is exceptional out of structure. When a play breaks down, he can create, which is where he's been given those, which I don't think is necessarily fair, but the Patrick Mahomes comparisons by a lot of people, because of his ability out of structure to create plays. Drake May is incredible within structure, within the pocket, on time, bang, bang, bang. That's where you need to be, 3-step drop. You already hit, your back foot hits on the 3rd step, balls out, bam. That's where you want it to be. I think where the teams might, I wouldn't be surprised if you see in the NFL half the teams have Drake May number one, the other half have Caleb number one, because I think it all comes down to offensive play style. So if you're an offense who thrives with guys out of structure, then Caleb would be your number one. If you're in an offense where everything's got to be precision, a la Kyle Shanahan, where everything's to the beat, bam, Drake May would probably be the number one sort of criteria there. So I do have Caleb number one, but really to me it's really quite close. It's just a preference for me as to how you view quarterback play within the NFL, and if you like the guys who are your Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson-y types, or if you prefer your guys who are, Jared Goff type of players.
Yeah. Oh man, so much that you said there just had light bulbs in my head go off of like, oh yeah, that's right. Got to mention this. I think that the most glaring thing about Caleb Williams is he came into the 2023 season with an unreal amount of hype. He had an absolutely fantastic 2022 season. He'd sort of put up one of the almost like sort of top 5 best performances that we'd seen as far as like passer rating goes, as well as like completion percentage and just ability to scramble and make plays. It was really, really awesome, up there with like Joe Burrow and other various quarterbacks that we've seen in years past. And then 2023 happened, and it was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
USC started the season 6-0. They won the first 6 games. They were sort of against teams in their sort of division, like Stanford, Arizona State, Colorado was a high expectation one. Arizona was an interesting game because even though they won that, Arizona would go on to become one of the top 25 ranked teams as well, which we didn't expect at the time. And then the wheels sort of fell off a little bit for the team itself. It was Notre Dame beat them, Utah beat them, and that was without Cam Rising. Cal, they had a win against, but it wasn't pretty. Cal, who was one of the worst teams in the whole of FBS, they put up a decent score on them. And then they had the gauntlet of Washington, Oregon, and UCLA to finish the season. And so a lot of sort of glaring weaknesses and holes came out of that. And that really affected Caleb Williams. We saw the footage of him after I think it was the Washington game where he ran over to his mom and was crying in her arms, and people picked that apart. And, we like to think that, people like you and I probably don't look into it as much, but there was a discourse on Twitter as well about, NFL teams care about this kind of stuff. Coaches care about this kind of stuff. Yeah,
that's the thing. No, you're right though. But when you think of a lot of these teams, it's that joke that NFL teams are run by old white guys who have to have a lot of teams have their right. Your quarterback has to be between 6 foot and 6'3", and they need to weigh this, and they need to do this, and they need to do this. And if anything falls outside of their bubble of what it needs to be, they instantly get downgraded because of it. So something like that. And I think too, the other part was there was the crying in his mum's arms, which a lot of people got upset about, but it was also them blowing off the press afterwards.
Yes, that's
right.
So
that's going to be one. That's going to be one of those things where an NFL general manager might look at it and go, "Well, if my franchise quarterback can't even come out in a game that they've lost and won't even speak to the media, then do I want that person to be the face of my franchise?" Because you see so many guys that come out and they might have played an incredible game and, kicker misses a field goal as time expires and they lose the game, and the quarterback comes out in the press conference afterwards, "Yeah, that was my fault. I didn't make enough plays. I didn't do this and I didn't do this." And it was, it's that sort of, in a way, the role that you see of a lot of quarterbacks. They take on whenever a loss happens, it's their fault. That's how they sort of look at it. And you could see some general managers would be very upset with the fact that, well, he's not even speaking to the press after this loss. Like, do we want that guy running our franchise?
Absolutely. And I think the other big takeaway for me from that season just gone was I think there's a lot of things going on. And one is definitely draft fatigue, I think, is starting to happen for a lot of people, where we've been talking him up for so long. We're probably overanalyzing it now to a point as well. And then you've kind of got the guys who on Twitter, online, just trying to sort of get more clicks by saying, is he actually top one? Like, what are we talking about here? And it's sort of like, okay, we're now deep into, and it's only going to get worse because we're not even in, we're in January. There's still Feb, March, and even all of April to go. And it's going to be a wild time. But Yeah, there is a bit of discourse. I really like what you said about like the pick your poison one. Do you like Drake May? Do you like Caleb Williams? Because if you're the Bears and you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, we're going to draft Caleb Williams. Here's what I want to ask you is, do you see stylistically a huge difference between Justin Fields and Caleb Williams?
Yes, and it's hard to say. I'd say
no, right?
it is yes and no. I think that Justin Fields is a far better runner than what Caleb is. Like Caleb can do it, but Justin Fields is a quarterback who could run for 1,000 yards. Like you're confident in saying that. Caleb Williams, I don't think can.
Right.
But Caleb does appear to be the better, quicker, faster processor, create more with his arm. Yeah. But I do think a lot of some of this for Justin Fields comes down to like scheme, quarterback coaching, that sort of stuff. Like the type of offense that he runs. This just a quick aside, just because you brought up Justin Fields, I had just had this thought previously before. I reckon the best case scenario, I do think the Chicago Bears go and take Caleb Williams with number one. They trade Fields. I have this fun thought process in my head of Justin Fields to the New England Patriots, and the Patriots select Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 3.
Yep.
That's just in my mind. I was like, I would hate that because I'm not a big fan of the Patriots, but I would love that at the same time.
My worst fears is slowly becoming a reality that the Patriots may in fact draft Marvin Harrison at number 3, where wide receivers go to die.
Yes.
What a shame.
What a shame.
The reason I bring it up is because like it's for that fact. It's like, obviously, like I think that both players are talented in their own right between Caleb Williams and Justin Fields. I just think like you look at Justin Fields play, even just in this last season gone, even over the last 3 seasons, it's like snap the ball, play develops. Okay, play's not working out, play breaks down. Okay, scramble around, maybe play hero ball, make something amazing happen, or go and run. Like, who have I just described? Have I just described Justin Fields or Caleb Williams there? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
It is for different reasons, though, and I do understand that component of it as well. And I think one of the parts that's getting overlooked at the moment with Caleb Williams and why he might be getting a bit of a negative rap a little bit is for that fact alone that, like, USC was a terrible team. There's 133 teams in the FBS, and I think USC, didn't they have like a bottom 10 defense or a bottom 15? It was somewhere in that range. And what they expected Caleb Williams to do every single game, every single snap of the ball was say, please bail us out, please help us out. And I know he touts himself on his social media, on Twitter and stuff as Superman. He's got like the Superman banner. He really he likes to compare himself to Superman. But I mean, it was almost like 100% of snaps that didn't go to the running back was like, Caleb, please bail us out of this. And his receivers were not sort of like, we look at like what Michael Penix just played with in Odunze and Polk and those guys. And we also look at Jayden Daniels, who had 2 top receivers as well. Even Bo Nix had Troy Franklin. And it was like, well, who's Caleb Williams throwing to? I'm trying to think. It was like, is it Taj Washington?
Yeah, the names are sort of escaping me at the moment because I've sort of been watching a little bit of film of everything, and sometimes the guys' names are blending into one. But I think one of the things. Brennan Rice, he was one
Taj Washington, Brennan Rice, Deuce Robinson, like Mario Williams, Mario Williams was a good player, but these guys aren't exactly first round talents that the other guys are playing with.
No, and I think one of the things too, when you look at strengths of Caleb Williams, he's one of these guys who his strengths are also his weaknesses because of how good his strengths are. So what I mean by that, like he has the arm talent he can make every throw on the field, and he can really zing that ball when he gets to. But then the counteract to that is that because he can do that, he takes too many chances and tries to force the ball into tight windows, which can create turnovers.
And that is a concern.
his athleticism to be able to escape the pocket, to make these off script plays, to get out, that's a fantastic positive to have in the NFL nowadays. But in saying that, he then also relies on that too much to beat the defense. Now, that might not work in college, but when you're out on the NFL field, like, you've got a whole defense of defensive ends who can run 4.5s, 4.4, like, what I mean? Like, his athletic. So a lot of these positives for him also can be seen as negatives because of how strong they are. It's like, I think one of the best things, like, this is going to sound like a weird comparison, but Peyton Manning always said, if he was making a game-winning drive or trying to, he would rather be down 4 than down 3. Right. And he was asked about that once, and he said, well, if you're down 3, the coaching goes conservative because all you need is a field goal. But if you're down 4, you need a touchdown to win. Yeah. So therefore, you become more aggressive. Yeah. Caleb Williams sometimes is like, do you know what? I could have this check down to this guy who's running this nice crosser, or I could throw it over his head and zing it between 3 people. And now I've turned it over, and it's it's one of those things that can happen. So he's a very polarizing player, and like I said, I have him one. To me, him and Drake Maye are sort of 1A, 1B for me. Like, I'm, because I think if he goes to Chicago, if they do take him like Caleb number 1 overall, I think that can sort of work with the guys they have. But say if it's for some New England, okay, so say New England does trade up to number 1. To me, Drake Maye seems to fit better with New England because of the lack of wide receiver talent.
Yeah.
So you need more in-structure plays.
Yeah, I mean, with their new coaching staff and their completely new day in New England, like, who knows what we're going to get out of them as well. Yeah. Look, they might take a quarterback. I hope they do. But we'll see. Last thing I want to say just on Caleb Williams before we move on. The rumors that Chicago may be interested or hiring Cliff Kingsbury came over the airwaves. Or was it Lincoln Riley? Now I'm confused.
No, Cliff. Yeah, because Cliff. he's been was he USC's offensive coordinator? No, where was he?
I thought it was Texas Tech.
That's where
no, because he had Pat Mahomes, he played with Baker, and he had Kyler, so he must have been a Sooner. Or no, I must be thinking of Lincoln Riley. I always get them confused. Okay. Anyway.
No, so at the moment, Cliff Kingsbury is a senior offensive analyst and quarterbacks coach at USC.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. So, I thought he was just kicking it in Thailand still.
No, so he's come back and he has been working with USC. So that sort of, if they are looking at actually hiring him as offensive coordinator, to me, that sort of screams that Caleb Williams will be going. If they do hire him, Caleb Williams is going number 1 to Chicago.
100%. Yeah, there's no smoke screens there anymore. And I think that's all I've got for now on him. I would actually kind of like to see him go to Washington. I think there is something there about him going to his hometown. He's a Washington, D.C. native, born and bred. And I think that'd be kind of be a cool link up. I just don't see it happening. I like that you think that Caleb and Drake are sort of like 1A, 1B. I kind of have Drake a little bit in it. Like, I have him in the next tier, basically.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it will end up depending on what the coaching staff, whether Chicago, because obviously Chicago hasn't made up their mind yet what they're doing, whether they're sticking with Fields or moving on. But I think it really does depend on who ends up with that number 1 pick, because if it is Chicago, I think Caleb goes first. If it is a team maybe like a Washington or a New England or something, then I could see Drake Maye going to one of those two. So to me, I find it hard to split them because of what I was saying. Like, I like the fact that Caleb can create off script, and therefore, receivers are always needing to be ready. They might have to readjust their routes, but I also really like the way that some quarterbacks play, like Drake Maye, where everything's timed to perfection, and when it works, it looks great when you see everyone's running their routes at the right time. Everyone's going to be there. As soon as that back foot hits on that drop bend, ball's out, it's in space, you're running free. So I find it really hard to separate the two because to me, they are both very good, but very different types of quarterbacks.
For sure. And also, you actually kind of just reminded me the last thing I wanted to bring up about Caleb Williams is, like it's the NFL playoffs right now. We're all watching the final 4 teams. It's Lamar Jackson, who is, generational talent. Patrick Mahomes, generational talent. It is, we're just seeing CJ Stroud, who they just got knocked out today or yesterday. But like we're seeing and this is what I was saying at the start, where I think people are overthinking it just a little bit. It's like Caleb Williams is these things. Now, I know people don't want to compare him to Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. And of course, you can't in your own right. But if you want to take a chance on a guy who could get to that level, I think it's right there.
But the thing is, you actually just bring up a really good point because of these two quarterbacks. Because if you think of it, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Caleb Williams are all these guys who can create off script and can get out and move and things like that. Drake Maye, lesser extent Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, same lesser extent, but they're the guys who work better within structure. So this is really, these games that are coming up are the exact types of arguments that you can have between the quarterbacks, like who's better for a team. And it's really, like I said, it's really hard when you go with the names of Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, but Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, like if they were playing one another, so if it was say Patrick Mahomes versus Jared Goff and Lamar Jackson versus Brock Purdy, that to me is like a, really intriguing mindset because of how different those types of quarterbacks are. So, I mean, we'll get that obviously in the Super Bowl. There's going to be one super mobile quarterback and one who's not as much. But it's just a real good juxtaposition of pretty much what this argument's going to be for the next 3 months of Caleb versus Drake. Yep,
for sure. And let's get to Drake now. Donning the cap that you have there, the University of North Carolina Tar Heels. It is Drake Maye. He was my number 2 quarterback going into the season. Came out my number 2 quarterback pretty comfortably as well. Having said that, though, actually, I think, and this is a slight spoiler, but I think there's a world in which, for fantasy, particularly if we're talking about that, Jayden Daniels could start to make a bit of a run. The Tar Heels had a sort of an up and down season. Actually, very, very similar to USC. They started out with 6 wins. They were 6-0. Then they went on to lose a couple of games. They won a couple more, but then they finished the season poorly. They lost against Clemson, and they lost in that epic North Carolina State. Actually, sorry, that game doesn't really count because Drake Maye didn't actually play that one. I was thinking of the actual week 1 game against South Carolina Gamecocks and Spencer Rattler. That was an epic season opener. Give me your quick thoughts. I mean, he was throwing to receivers like J.J. Jones, Devontae Walker, who he is a receiver who we'll talk about when we do the receiver show because he very much impressed me during the last season. And then sort of after that, he didn't have too much else going on. Running back, they had Amarian Hampton as well. So they struck a good balance there. But for the most part, it's interesting that these 2 quarterbacks who are the highest prospects, their teams sort of are a bit sort of like average.
Yeah. Like I said, I really like Drake. He is to me like a day one NFL starter. Like, he's got that sort of, he's got great like pocket awareness, pocket footwork. Like he can step up, he can move, he's got, I really like, multiple arm angles, the way he throws the ball from. So like, he's not just he's sort of got a bit of that, like, your Lamar, Patrick Mahomes type of things with, sidearm, lower, to get around the defender as opposed to throwing it up and getting it batted at the line sort of thing. Like he's got some of that ability. I just like, he just always looks to me like poised.
Yeah,
like he doesn't seem to get, he just never seems to get phased. And I really like that. But then, if quickly look at some of his, like his negatives, he's a bit like Caleb, a bit of a risk taker at times. Like there's certain times where you look at it and you go, did you really need to try and force that ball in there? Like I get, to me, this is sort of what it sort of felt like Sam Howell was dealing with in his last year in North Carolina, trying to maybe show off a little bit too much because, I mean, the season before Sam Howell went into the draft like college, he had De'Armu Brown, he had Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, like he had these really good receivers. Then the next year, the quality wasn't as high. He tried to do too much and his draft stock fell. Right. Caleb obviously didn't quite go the same. Drake didn't go quite the same way. Like he didn't go from maybe being a first round quarterback to a fifth rounder. But, there are some risks that he takes. I think he probably holds on to the ball sometimes a little bit too long. That's probably where, he does lose some of his... It was just pretty much what you like, So Caleb gets out, runs, takes the ball, he's off. Drake sort of holds on to it just that half a beat too long and then ends up, I guess you could almost call it like sometimes poor pocket presence. Like he's got really good footwork to maneuver around. But then sometimes you sit there and you go, did you not even look to see that there's 2 free rushes coming off the edge that you just completely missed because you were waiting for that perfect sail route to hit? And, you need to let that ball go that half a beat quicker and you might have got it. But, like I said, I find it really hard to differentiate between the two guys.
I'm so glad you said that because I haven't actually heard anyone really talk about this, but I've sort of felt this way as well. And maybe I'm reading too much into it. I just find him slow, not in terms of like scrambling, get the ball run. I mean, in terms of like snap the ball and then get your reads on. I just thought he was sort of like, oh, here's the ball, have a look around. It's funny you were talking about like he never seems phased. His mood is always the same. And I thought of that meme of like, the many moods of Drake May. It's like happy, sad, angry, emotional, like up, down. And it's just like every face exactly is what came to mind for me. But like he definitely flashes. He's got a fantastic arm. He's incredibly accurate, which I think is going to be probably his biggest strength. And again, if the play breaks down, he will scramble and he'll take off with the ball. Sometimes I almost felt like the play hadn't broken down, but he kind of just made the decision that he would take off with the ball anyway. I thought that happened quite a bit. Like he really likes to roll out to his right and then throw the ball. It's almost like that's just like probably like his go-to thing. It's almost like, playing Madden. It's like, eventually, once you start to get good at it, you're like, oh, I'm just going to roll right every time because no one can catch me. Then I can throw the ball from there.
Yeah,
I wonder
it is that thing though. Like it's so great that he's just constantly poised, doesn't look phased, but then at the same time, he does. Some of his reps do come across as a bit of lackadaisical. Like, it's just sort of like, man, if you just get that ball out to that crosser, just throw it like. Because I think sometimes, and this is a problem that it feels like nearly every rookie quarterback has, except for this year, it seems like CJ Stroud. But every quarterback who comes from college to the NFL, they're looking for college open, which is 4 yards open, 3 yards open. Like NFL open is half a yard.
Yeah.
Or a yard. I mean. And that's where sometimes I think maybe some of these guys might have that problem to start with is they're going to be looking for and I mean, I saw it from my team, like Bryce Young. There was some times where it's like, mate, you've just got to let that ball rip because that's NFL open.
Yeah.
You're waiting for college open. That doesn't happen very often. Like, it's just, to me, he's one of these guys who it's so great that he's so poised all the time, but the lackadaisical, the sort of like, mate, you just get the ball out, just get it out as quickly as possible. That's what you're going to need to do at the next level to be successful.
And we'll probably do some like home brand versus like exceptional brand type comparisons once the NFL draft passes. But it's like you say, like his ceiling can be Justin Herbert. A lot of comparisons get thrown out. His floor, though, it's kind of like it's almost like Alex Smith type, like can run on the ball if he wants, incredibly accurate gameplay. Like, and Alex Smith was a great quarterback as well, but like you're kind of looking for that spectacular almost, and you're starting to get sort of like I'm trying to think of like the Chad Henne almost type.
Yeah, I was trying to think of who like.
It's like it feels like there's so many comparisons, and yet there feels like there's not really.
Because it sort of feels like in a way it's Jared Goff in LA Rams in his last season is like a flaw. Like it's average, it's
Yeah,
serviceable,
I
but
just
it's
think he
not
can.
fantastic.
I
But
just think he runs so much more than Jared
yeah,
Goff ever did.
but
Just
that's
from
the
what
thing. Like it's like, oh, if Jared Goff could run, but then
yeah,
it's
yeah,
also sort of like, okay, no, that doesn't quite work. So maybe it's and you sort of think back, and it's like, is it sort of maybe a Donovan McNabb?
yeah,
Maybe,
potentially.
maybe not. Maybe it's like
Yeah,
you start cycling through some of these guys,
yeah,
and you're like, you don't really have a great floor
yeah.
quarterback. Maybe it's early day Ben Roethlisberger. Like,
Yeah, it kind of feels to me, it's just kind of like like clear QB2. Not that I'm saying Drake May will be a QB2 or a backup or anything like that, but just like those ones that have can come in and just like game manage and play the system and run the system just as well, like not to the same extent as like the higher level quarterback one, Justin Herbert, but
mm,
like almost that like could still come in and do something similar, just a little bit worse.
it's sort of almost like if you put Alex Smith's or if you put Mitchell Trubisky's athleticism into Alex Smith.
Yes, there you
That's
go.
sort of like he's
Which
got that
sounds good.
ability. He's got that ability to bust out, have a 30-yard run and outrun the defense. But then he also has that ability to suddenly you look at his score, his box score, and he's 18 for 24 for
Yeah,
112 yards.
yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
that's sort of the vibe you can get from it.
Yeah, and look, honestly, I think it'll be good. I think it'll all be fine. There's just parts where I'm like, yeah, when you're an NFL team and you're trying to decide between Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jayden Daniels, they all clearly have like athleticism upside. There's just sort of like that part of that's like, huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
So who's your quarterback three? That's who I'm curious on. I think we're going to have the same here for number three.
well, so this is what we were getting to earlier, where it wasn't even in my top 10 going into the season, but definitely came out way better draft stock. It is Jayden Daniels. It has to be, I feel like, at this point after his
Yeah.
Heisman campaign.
Yeah, I have him third as well. It is mind blowing when you actually think back that Jayden Daniels was throwing to Brandon Ayuk in
Yeah.
college. Like that's how long he's been in college for. Like,
yeah.
well, Brandon Ayuk was drafted in the 2020 draft,
He must have
and
come into the league really young.
I think Jayden Daniels has been 5 years in college.
Yeah, I'm having a look now. I can't see his age though. It must be 23.
So 23.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that, 2019 he was at Arizona State, 2019
Yeah.
to 2021, and then 22 and 23 he was at LSU. So, he sort of is one of those guys who, he's been around for a long time,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
he obviously leaving Arizona State, that the teammates there didn't seem to like him very much.
So that was always my thing with Jayden Daniels and why he wasn't in my top 10 going into the season was he always like Arizona State. He was a good player. He helped the team. They were a competitive team in those years, particularly his final year there. But then he got to LSU and it was just kind of a little bit more of the same. And I was like, yeah, cool. I think we're starting to get an idea of who Jayden Daniels is. But then it's like I'm saying, like Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, all of a sudden you're throwing the ball to them. And out of nowhere, he's just completely elevated. Like he's making way better decisions as far as, like, do I throw the ball downfield? Do I rush? He was throwing absolute bombs. We'll probably talk about it more when we do the wide receivers. But Malik Neighbors had something like 35 explosive plays on the season last year. And an explosive play is how PFF charts a catch of more than 15 to 20 air yards. 30 in the entire season. Like, so he was throwing those bombs down there. And not to mention that, like, they were playing in really, really competitive games. And for the thing that you tip your hat for Jayden Daniels was they were winning them as well. They had a huge game to open the season against Florida State, which they lost, which was interesting. And then they go on to beat teams like Arkansas. They beat Auburn, which was competitive. They did lose to Alabama towards the end of the season, but then a good win against Florida. And for a lot of them, they were underdogs as well, as weird as that is to say. They did finish like overall the rank, the college rank was good by the end, but it did take a long time to get there as well.
Yeah, his season this year is very Joe Burrow-esque. When you think of it,
Yes.
Joe Burrow transferred from Ohio State to LSU, and prior to his last season in college, he was being looked at as third to fifth rounder, depending on who you sort of looked at. By the end of the year, he was Heisman. He led the greatest offense in the history of college, and he went number one overall. Like, I'm not saying Jayden Daniels is doing that, but he's had that type of, that type of season where he went from, second to third round, maybe sort of, we'll see what happens sort of thing, to now, there's talk of, top 3 pick maybe. Like, it's potential to happen.
I'll read off his game log, his stats from the season last year. 3,800 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. On top of 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions is insane. On top of that, 1,134 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
I think a team can get excited about that.
They can. Do you have any concerns with him, though, in the NFL?
Yeah, heaps.
So what are your...
Off the back of what we just saw from first round overall pick Bryce Young, like Jayden Daniels, he's a small boy. Well, I shouldn't say boy. Sorry. He's a small guy. He is, what is he? He's listed here at 185 pounds, 6'3", so tall. But because he's tall, he kind of doesn't thin out. He doesn't stock out as much. So those are my main concerns. And I know that we see Lamar Jackson and he never gets injured through rushing. It's just not a thing that happens. And I'm not really ever concerned about it. But I just and Bryce Young came up okay throughout the season last year. But there are those elements of that do worry me a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I thought too sometimes maybe he does bail out the pocket a little bit too early. Like, it's hard to tell sometimes with some of the film that you see, because you don't get the whole all 22 film that you can see. Yeah. So, there is question sometimes. Maybe he does bail out. I'm not sure. It just depends. But that's something that can easily be sort of fixed once you get to the NFL. It's sort of like, maybe just hold it for that beat a little bit longer, and you might. And like I said, this comes down to the college open versus NFL open. Maybe once he gets to the NFL, he gets coached up to go, hey, you were waiting for these guys to get that extra 1 to 2 yards in college. Well, you don't do that here. You throw the ball when they're not even out of their break yet. So there's that. I thought too, the other concerns that I had is, sometimes he looked great within the pocket, and other times he looked pretty average. It's just consistency. Sure. I think it's just got to be more consistent with some of that. And also, LSU didn't really. Now, this could have just been because of the receivers they had, but it didn't seem like they targeted the middle of the field very often. So I
think a lot of outside.
Yeah, so I don't see, if you're but if he gets drafted to, say, New England, if that happens, and he's got to play the Jets 2 times a year, I don't see him beating Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed 2 times a year deep all the time. You have to use the middle of the field. And maybe that's coming back to what you were saying, the size concerns. Not that he's short like Bryce Young, but, if you're not using the middle of the field, is that a concern for you, especially too if you are just wanting to bail and run all the time? And that's when you, like you said, small guy might end up getting hurt by doing it. But it's hard to tell sometimes how his game's going to translate coming into the NFL.
Some of the other things that I was thinking about as well as you're saying that. So yeah, a lot of passes, a lot of throws to the outside, outside the numbers, down the line, very accurate, which is good to see. And then my only other concern is okay, hang on, how much of it is Jayden Daniels? How much of it is the fact that it's Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, 2 of the highest receiver prospects as well? And look, I know Joe Burrow was fine in the end. He was throwing to Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall. He ended up absolutely fine. On the flip side, though, there are some instances where you see, I said on one of our shows before last season, I'm watching Clayton Tune throwing balls to Tank Dell, and I said, okay, either Clayton Tune is elite or Tank Dell is elite, or they're both elite, but I don't believe there's a world that exists in which neither of them are elite. And obviously, we went on to say that the answer was Tank Dell was the elite one and was making Clayton June look really, really good in Houston. So that's just the only part of my thought that creeps in as well. Let's say the Patriots draft him. Well, you're going from throwing the ball to Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas to throwing the ball to
Kendrick Bourne, Devontae Parker, Pop
Kendrick Bourne,
Douglas.
Devontae Parker. And I think a lot of those guys are free agents and they might not even actually be there. You know, Pop Douglas is going to be there and that's great. But we're talking about like potentially some elite receiver talent to
I forgot Keishon Booty as well.
Keishon Boutte. Yeah, maybe they can link up again then.
Yeah.
So like that's my only thing there. So there are a couple of concerns. I think for fantasy though, you could actually make a fairly strong case for Jayden Daniels as the second quarterback off the board. But look, again, 40 touchdowns, 4 picks. That's freaking great. That's an awesome stat line that you want to see. Won the Heisman. The other thing you can also point to is how many times has a Heisman winner not worked out in the NFL? I think it's only happened like once or twice. So over like 40-year period. So that's a really strong stat in his favor as well.
So I think too here we've got 3 quarterbacks who I'm pretty confident go in the first round. From this point onwards, for me,
I reckon top five.
Potentially. I reckon but this point onwards, and I wonder if we might both have the same quarterback 4 here. This point onwards, you could tell me 2 or 3 of these guys go in the first round, or you could tell me none of them go in the first round. I've got my thoughts, but who I have as my quarterback 4 is Michael Penix Jr.
Okay, we differ. We differ here.
Okay, so but
what we don't differ on is the point of view that these guys could be either top 10 first round or they could be like day 3. I have no idea.
I think day 2. See, this is the difficult thing is, so Michael Penix Jr. has had 4 season-ending injuries. That's the biggest red flag.
Concern. It's not. I don't think it's the biggest one actually, but it is a big one.
It is one. I think will probably end up. To me personally, I reckon he's a second round pick. To me, he's going to be like the Hendon Hooker because of his injury history. Last year we saw Hendon Hooker slip. He might have been the third rounder, Hendon Hooker actually, or it was late second.
He was. No, he was a third round pick. He was day 2 into the Lions. Let's talk about Michael Penix. He's my number 5. He was my number 5 in the end.
Okay, so I got him 4. So we're not too dissimilar. It's not a huge drop off between us there. But I think he personally goes second round because of his injury history. Look, if he wasn't injured, I reckon I'd maybe back end of the first round.
Yeah, I think he goes first round.
See, okay.
And my logic is just that, like, supply, like teams are thirsty for quarterbacks, and this is a draft that has got a lot of them. And I think that there's going to be some teams out there who, once you get past pick 15 into the 20s, I think there's going to be some teams who are like, like Seattle. Seattle's picking 16th. We're going to have a new head coach. We're going to have a completely new system. And, Penix played in Washington. The fans love him there. Everyone loves him there. There's a world that, he could just roll right in across the road or the suburb over and come to Seattle. And that, like,
my question is, though, based off of his injury history, which obviously is a big thing in 2 NFL like general managers, NFL organizations, is it possible Seattle can pick him up in the second round as opposed to pick 16?
Yep.
That's sort of my thought process behind it, is there's a very good chance he is there at their second pick, their second round pick, as opposed to pick 16.
And this is part of the conversation as well, because, why don't the New England Patriots take Marvin Harrison at pick 3 and then the third pick of the second round, take Michael Penix. And then you've got just 2 like fantastic options right there for you that you didn't have to trade up for or burn, draft capital on or anything like that. So I can definitely see the arguments there. I'm less concerned about the injury history. I understand it's there. I don't. This is the Craig Holbrecht school of thought from the Ring of Fantasy Football show. Just with your ACLs, just tear them, get them over and done with.
Yeah.
Once they're done, they're sort of done, aren't they? And then you kind of almost never do it again. So, like, injuries, I think, can come and go. Now, look, he has had a lot of them, and I think the teams will be concerned about that. I actually think that his biggest knock is his age. He was in college for a really, really long time. 6 years, in fact. So,
yeah.
And I think that that'll concern teams. And I do, and this affected me, I think it'll affect NFL teams as well. I do think the national championship game hurt his draft stock.
Well, that was what I was going to say too. Now, I think generally he's a pretty accurate quarterback. Generally.
Yep.
That game he was missing throws left, right, and center. Now, was it the lights were too bright? And if that's the case, I'm really worried about picking him even in the second round. If he's in the national championship game and the lights were far too bright, and therefore that's where he was, missing his throws, like, then I'm a little bit concerned actually wanting him as my franchise quarterback. Was it the fact that Michigan were pressuring the ball, like pressuring him and forcing him to speed up his internal clock? And that seems to be sort of, I guess you could say, the word out on the street with Michael Penix Jr. is, like, I can't say a lot of quarterbacks. Majority of quarterbacks, there are guys who do not deal very well at all with pressure. Blitzers, just being pressured and having to speed up your internal clock and get the ball out. He sort of seems like he has that ability to beat the blitz, but at the same time, if he gets too much pressure, he sort of discombobulates a little bit and doesn't know what to do. And it's one of those things. He's accurate when he's out of structure. He reminds me a little bit actually of Tua Tagovailoa.
But you know why?
If he's what?
Because he's left-handed.
Well, it's also actually, like, Tua to me is the Mike McDaniel offense is working so well for Tua because he's got that. Obviously, it's the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, but he's in that system where it's you've got your read, bam, ball's got to go out, sort of thing. Tua seems to struggle when he's got to make too many reads, and these first and second reads are gone. Then he sort of goes, where do I go now? And you can sort of see the wheels turning, and he's not super athletic. Tua is. Michael Penix reminds me of that too. Like, he's not the most agile guy.
Athletic. Can I read you some rushing stat lines from Michael Penix from the season that I'm looking at now? Against Boise State, 2 rushing attempts, -2 yards. Against Arizona, 2 rushing attempts, -5 yards. Against Stanford, 1 rushing attempt, -12 yards. Against Utah, 5 rushing attempts, -14 yards. Obviously, he's getting sacked the shit out of, which is interesting because the Huskies are they were a good O-line going through the season as well. But what I'm saying is, so the game against Texas, he hit 3 rushes for 31 yards. So he ripped off a long one there, and he had 22 yards as well against Oregon State. Outside of that, though, man, like, 11 yards was the most rushing. Like, this was, I think, what became a glaring hole in that enlightened everybody in the national championship game was that Michigan was a fairly close, like, the schemes that they were running to confuse quarterbacks. It's very close, similar to the NFL. And what we saw from Michael Penix was once his plays broke down, well, that's it. At least, like, with Caleb Williams, okay, let's go scramble. Let's go do something. Let's make stuff happen. Same with Drake May, same with Jayden Daniels. They can make things happen. They've got that scrambling, rushing upside that, like, they've got other options. And with Michael Penix, it was like, oh shit, okay, first read, okay, it's not there. Tight end's not there. Second read's not there. It's like, well, I guess I'm fucked then. So I better just fall down.
And that's where the Tua thing comes in through for me as well. Like, Tua this year looked like very similar. Like, if Tyreek Hill wasn't there in his first read and Jalen Waddle wasn't there for his second read, he was sort of like, shit, where do I go now? And that's where, we saw in the championship game, there was, like, some of these overthrows. I was looking at, like, what's happened there? Is that, like, a receiver slightly changed his route? But
or was it pressure?
Because he was. Well, yeah. Did the receiver change his route because they read something where they were wide open and you thrown, like a corner route when they've gone vertical? Like, was that a miscommunication, or should have you been actually able to see that from there? But you're so programmed into boom, back step, drop out. It's got to be there because they're going to be in this spot. Is that where this sort of breaks down? So I think a lot of these quarterbacks, after those first three, a lot of these quarterbacks are going to cause a lot of controversy and discussions between people, because you could number these probably the next three, including Penix, in any order, and you'll upset someone.
Yep, I think so. And look, it's no secret that the Pac-12 just did not have elite defenses by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we just talked about USC, of course. So there is that element. I mean, Odunze had over 1,600 yards. Like I've just said this about Jayden Daniels. I've got to say it about Michael Penix as well. He's throwing the ball to Rome Odunze, to Jalen Polk, to Jalen McMillan as well.
Jalen McMillan, yeah.
I always think of getting their names confused, or no, it's a similar name as well. And, Polk had 1,159 rushing yards as well. Not to take anything away from Michael Penix. So, I mean, he threw for 4,900 yards, 36 touchdowns. And
this is the question, though. Was Michael Penix making the receivers look good, or were the receivers making Michael Penix look good? That's the question I think that comes up with him.
Yeah.
It was, well, you see sometimes that the receivers help. Yeah, that's what I was curious about, because sometimes the receiver makes the quarterback look better, and sometimes the quarterback makes the receivers look better. So I think that'll be the question that a lot of people are going to have the discussions over the next, 3 months, is who made who look better.
Last thing I'll say about Penix as well, because we've got to move quickly. Do you think he was robbed of the Heisman?
No, I find it hard to find it hard with Heisman stuff, because it's not the same competition that everyone plays in, week out. Like,
it's not NFL MVP. It is a different thing that they're looking at.
Sometimes too, when you watch two teams play, you watch them and they go through the entire season. You go, are you two actually playing the same sport? Because you both look completely different. You've ended up with same record, but you'll see one team's played Eastern Carolina of AT&T or something, and then the other team's like, oh yeah, we played TCU and we've played Ohio State and we've done this. It's sort of like, it's really hard to try and figure out sometimes. So Heisman,
well, we don't have to do that anymore, because they're all bloody merging together. So
but Heisman, I can't see a good enough argument to take it away from Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, I can. I actually think that Michael Penix was robbed of the Heisman, and the reason I say that is because he won the other award. What is the other one for, like, the really good passing, the really good quarterback award? I can't remember. But anyway, there was some sort of stat that was like, whoever had won that award, whichever quarterback, would also go on to win the Heisman. It was something like 30 of 30, or like 31 of 30 of the last quarterbacks. It had panned out that way. So, it was just that argument of, like, it is kind of weird that they would give him the quarterback award and not Jayden Daniels if Jayden Daniels is going to win MVP. But I digress. Let's get to my number 4 guy.
I was going to say, who's your number 4? This will be interesting for me.
Well, this is it's strange, but I think I caught the bug. I had JJ McCarthy at number 4. I have him at number 4, I should say. I had him at number 7 going into the season.
I've got him at 6.
And I'm not sure if it was because Dan had convinced me. Look, what I will say is we did these quarterback evaluations before the season. We did a couple of weeks, and we were talking about our favorite quarterbacks going in. I had, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Sam Hartman, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Jordan Travis, JJ McCarthy, Quinn Ewers. I just kind of thought JJ McCarthy was like the most, like, whatever quarterback. I'm like, yeah, sure, he'll probably be like a solid backup in the NFL. Who cares, whatever. But then, like, talking to Dan and talking more about it with other people, it was sort of like, I was like, okay, maybe I should actually watch him a bit closer and see what people are talking about. And I have to say, I think it's not like he's lighting the world on fire, right? And that's not what caught my eye. Although I think he was making some really, really big time throws. I think he's really, really accurate. And I think he was able to make plays that broke down. I think he was able to make them into positive gains. And I just think that an NFL team, I don't think they care about the lack of production. I don't think that they care that like Michigan didn't rely on him because he would still show up in spots. And I think that NFL teams are going to look at that and say, we can work with this guy. We can build with this guy. Like he's got the tools, he's got the base. Like I can develop him. And again, like I was saying before with Michael Penix, like I just think teams get thirsty for quarterbacks and they like a team's going to see him. Jim Harbaugh's going to be an NFL head coach soon. I mean, like there's an opportunity there for him to be in there.
So this, to me, just shows where I'm at with. I think there'll probably be more than 3 quarterbacks that go in the first round of this draft, but I, in the same breath, only think 3 quarterbacks should go in the first round of this draft.
Yeah, sure. The question is not should they. The question is
no. That's the thing. That's the thing. That's what I mean. Like, I think there'll be more than 3 that do go, but I personally don't think more than 3 should go. In the famous words of Ben Solak from the Ringer NFL Draft Show, I can't get there. I can't get there with JJ McCarthy at all. I mean, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, though, about like, you know, how NFL evaluators going to look at him. And there are probably some NFL evaluators who are going to do the same thing as you. He's got this talent. He can do this. He can do this. But at the end of the day,
he won a national championship game.
He did do it. But at the end of the day, it's like he threw the ball 10 times in that game. They didn't trust him to throw the ball too much. Like, you know, it sort of seemed like when they started playing better teams, they sort of started to not figure him out, but able to go, we want you to try and win the game. We'll try and take away the running game. We want you to try and beat us. I'm not a big fan. I don't think he's very accurate outside the numbers, like deep downfield. And Michigan obviously don't ask him to do that a lot.
I think he is. I think there were like, I'm sure he missed a few, but there's a lot of plays where he was outside the numbers and hit it.
Yeah, I don't think when he throws deep outside the numbers, though, like to those deep corners or something like, I don't know. I just, from what I've seen so far now, maybe I might need to watch a little bit more, but it was really inaccurate. There was one play, I was watching it literally just a few minutes before we started, and he went to take off and his receiver broke free. And he could see him, and it was like, throw the ball. The guy is literally 15 yards clear of anyone. He's got a 60-yard touchdown. There's not a person in sight. And he held on, ran to the sideline, nearly threw the ball out of bounds, and the receiver had to make a fantastic play to keep his feet in bounds to get a catch. And it was like, okay, well done. That was a 6-yard completion or whatever. I mean, he's like, his athletic ability is great, but I don't think that he will. Well, I can't get there as I was saying before. If your college team doesn't trust you to throw the ball, because I mean, you know, Ohio State, he threw for about 140 yards. You know, you start looking down some of these games.
Yeah, I mean, he never really played there too much.
Yeah, so to me, I'm surprised you have him there. I would actually have him late second, third rounder.
I have him fourth. No, like I can still have him as like a late second, third rounder. I have him fourth because I just think he's more attractive to NFL teams than Michael Penix is.
Yeah,
because of that, I think he'll go higher. And those two quarterbacks did just face off against one another. And I think that JJ McCarthy looked more impressive. And if you go back and actually look at the game before that against Alabama, he was really good. He played a really, really good game against Alabama, which I think people will look at as a sign that's like, okay, like there's things there. So he was 17 of 27 for 221 yards and 3 touchdowns against Alabama. He also rushed the ball 3 times for 25 yards. Like, he's like a low budget Drake May in theory. Like he could be to some teams.
And this could be just the fact of who they sort of played and what happened with the dominant, you know, the defense and all that sort of stuff, Michigan. But like we said, against Washington, it was 10 of 18 for 140 yards. Against Iowa before Alabama, they won 26-0, but it was 22 of 30 for 147. But then you look at Ohio State, 16 of 20 for 148. Maryland was 12 of 23 for 141. Penn State was 7 of 8 for 60 yards. Like, to me, I was sitting there going,
bad weather game, the Penn State.
I mean, he did have some decent games, Purdue, 335.
Say the next one.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's just, to me, I'm just looking at some of these. But when you're looking at the touchdowns over he threw 22 touchdowns for the season. In how many games did they play? It's sort of like
15 games.
15, one and a bit of game.
4 interceptions. So pretty good as well. 64 rushing attempts for 202 yards.
And 3 touchdowns.
I think that those were mostly kneel downs, I'm going to guess, because I don't remember him rushing the ball 64 times.
But yeah, it's to me, he might end up being, I guess, I'm trying to think of who do you remember a couple of years ago when not everyone, but a lot of people fell in love with the guys like Davis Mills and Ian Book and those guys who they thought might have a moment in the NFL given the opportunity? To me, he seems... I remember seeing at the time there were some people who were intrigued by their skill sets and thought, they've actually got a chance.
That was me last year with Tanner McKee. I was like, Tanner McKee, he could be something in the NFL. It's a shame he's
that was you. That was you last year with Clayton Tune.
Man. Hey, he started a game as well, so I won that bet.
But I don't know to me whether JJ McCarthy is, and like I said, maybe I might need to go and watch a little bit more, but at the moment, from what I've seen at the moment, I'm not sure he's going to be too much more than what those guys are.
If he can fall on a Kyle Shanahan type team where it's like, dude, seriously, just run this offense. You don't need to do anything spectacular. I think that teams are really going to like that. And Kyle Shanahan proteges are spreading thick and fast all over the NFL. So
yeah,
that's what I'll say about that. So yeah, I came into the season not high on him, came out being like, I think this guy's actually got quite a lot of things that will intrigue the NFL. And he backed it up with the wins as well and the coaching job. And similar to the other quarterbacks as well, he didn't really have too many amazing receivers to throw to. I think he was throwing to what was his name?
Roman Wilson.
Roman Wilson, yeah, is the one I'm thinking of. Who I'm not sure. Some people have him as a high receiver prospect, day 2. I don't see it, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I guess then my number 5 quarterback I had was Bo Nix.
Yep. We'll spend a little bit of time on here because I think the rest of them from here on out is just sort of a bit sort of wishy-washy. Yeah. But I do like Bo Nix's film for a lot of games that he did play this season.
Yeah, I thought, he showed some pretty decent arm strength, a decent athlete, probably a bit better than decent, to be honest. He's a bit like the first couple guys that we spoke about that can improvise with his legs. I wouldn't want to design an offense where it's okay, Bo Nix, your first choice is to run and then throw as a second option. But it's one of those things that he's decent enough an athlete that, if a play breaks down, he might be able to pull off a Patrick Mahomes type of 25-yard rush, to get to advance the ball. He, to me, sort of seems like a guy who might benefit well from a Shane Steichen type offense, quick game, get the ball out quick, move it. I think he starts to struggle when you've got to hold on to that ball that little bit longer. And sometimes with the film that I was watching, Oregon were playing Washington, and the first 5 or 6 passes, he just looked at Troy Franklin every single time. Threw the ball. They all got broken up passes, and you just sit there and you're like, you've got to look at someone else. Troy Franklin is a stud, but you've at least got to try to fool the defense and not just look at the one guy the entire time and throw him the ball. So, what do you think about Bo Nix?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm glad you said that because that was just sort of a lot of my points. I have him at 6, just behind Michael Penix, and it is sort of for that similar reason. Now, I know that Justin Herbert was the victim of Oregon many years ago now, but I kind of felt similar with Bo Nix. When he was at Auburn, he didn't look very good at all. He looked okay coming into his first season at Oregon, and then it was this last season just gone, he was just boom, he's on. I thought what was working really well for him was the Oregon system, which hadn't changed too much since Justin Herbert from the looks of things, because it was like check down to receivers at the line and they're going to take screens to the house. And there's just lots of that. But it did mix in a lot of like, hey, is Troy Franklin open over the top? Yes, he is. Cool. I'm going to throw that. And it's just like, yes, he's open. Yes, he's open. So let's throw these huge bombs. Unless, and then it was like, oh, it's not there. Okay, check down. And it's like, oh, okay, the check down's not there either. So I'm just going to take off and run. So it was like, this offense was humming. It was moving. It looked really good. It looked really efficient for that reason. It was like, and I have Troy Franklin as well as like a top prospect. Because I think he will be. But it was sort of like, is Bo Nix really in command? Like, is he commanding this offense the way that we can see the other quarterbacks that we've just talked about are? Like, they're in full control. Maybe not so much J.J. McCarthy because it was more of a run game, but it's sort of like, how much of that is Bo Nix just being like, I'm talented enough to do this? Now, like, look, his completion percentage, 77.4%. I think that's like one of the highest of all time in college football history, with like the minimum attempts that he had. His attempts were 470, 4,500 passing yards, 45 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 54 rushing yards for 234. So a bit of scrambling there. But that's what I'm saying is like the 3 interceptions, is that because like, as again, he's in the Pac-12, so the defenses aren't quite what you're going to get from Alabama and Michigan and Ohio State and places like that. And then also it's like, I felt like there was just so many checkdowns. It was like, how could you possibly go wrong?
Yeah. I sort of, and I think too, I think if he tidies up some of his mechanics as well, it'll make him a bit more successful, or have the ability to be a little bit more successful. Yeah. Like you could see, when he and a lot of these college guys are until they get into the NFL, but he seems like one of those guys that he was getting pressured and it was backpedal, and now I'm going to try and throw it while going backwards. And it's sort of, you could sort of see it float just that little bit, and you're like, you can't do that in the NFL. But he's another guy to me where ideally you sort of, like I said, you're looking mid to late second, early third sort of thing, where I would put him personally. But
well, that's the thing, like right? Said, like some of these comps that you can get from Bo Nix, you can get like Mac Jones, and I think that Mac Jones is actually not a bad comp. I think he has a little bit more rushing upside, of course, but just as far as like ability to throw the ball. What was one of the other ones I just saw that I thought was pretty good? Nah, it's gone now. So
I saw one that they said it was very Tyrod Taylorish.
Yep, that's a good one.
I could see it. I actually just quickly, we'll backpedal quickly. JJ McCarthy, did you have a comp for him? Because when I was watching him, I had one.
Yeah, who?
Oh, sorry, I had 2. And they were both first-round quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Selected 3 or 4 years apart to the exact same team. He reminded me a lot of Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson.
Okay. For JJ McCarthy?
Yeah.
No.
And I'm not. No.
Yeah. I can see Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold was actually very good at USC. Zach Wilson was the beneficiary of a lot of good things falling his way.
But I think it's a bit more Sam Darnold passing Zach Wilson's athleticism, because Zach Wilson is pretty athletic, so I could see that. But I just that was just my JJ McCarthy one that I thought.
The other Bo Nix comp was Kenny Pickett is like not a bad one as well, I feel. Stylistically, they look very different, but in terms of like processing power and efficiency and offensive ability, like I think that there's things there. Maybe I'm thinking of like Kenny Pickett from Pitt rather than Pittsburgh, but yeah.
Pittsburgh. Is there a Mitchell Trubisky in this draft?
Who could go second overall out of nowhere?
I was just more so thinking that everyone falls in love with his athleticism, and then turns out to not necessarily be the greatest quarterback. I'm not disrespecting the very first MVP, the Nickelodeon's most valuable player that Mitchell Trubisky won in that playoff game.
He sent them to the playoffs. Don't you forget? Yeah, so that's where I'm at with Bo Nix. He's the kind of guy. It's like, could he be a first round pick? Potentially.
That's what I mean. And this is where this draft could be 3 or it could be 6. And neither of that would probably shock me. What would shock me is
5. My guess is there'll be 5, I reckon, in the first one.
I think there'll be 4, but like I said, I would only personally have 3. But I think the only way that it would shock me if there was 6 in the first round is if my number 7 was in the first round.
Yeah,
my number 7, I don't think you had on your list either, and that was Spencer Rattler.
No way. My number 7 is Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the flashes.
Please welcome.
He's got the flashes. That's the thing. Yeah. What's that?
Look,
like arm talent, mobility.
I didn't want to spend too much time on Spencer Rattler because I think we'll get there once he actually lands. Because I'm like, are we just completely wasting our time if we talk about him here? I don't think so. I think that, like, he was a highly touted prospect coming out of high school. The year before Sam Howell declared for the draft, it was like 1A, 1B. It was like Spencer Rattler versus Sam Howell, who's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, because one of them will be. And then obviously things went massively sideways for them. But yeah, I just think I think Spencer Rattler does make some big time plays. His receivers were not like amazing. He did have Xavier Legette, who did sort of come to fruition this year. But I'm like, a lot of what I think that Xavier Legette was doing was powered by Spencer Rattler. I don't think it was just like he was the one who was like, I'm going to take this shit pass and turn it into something spectacular. I think it was because it Rattler was able to throw to his favorable side and make big plays. I think it was there. And just the last thing I'll say before you chime in is the Gamecocks had such a difficult schedule as well. They had one of the hardest in all of college football within their own division. Like, they had to play. I'm trying to bring it up now. I'm having some slight internet issues though, but so that was also working against them, where they were never going to win that many games anyway. So I don't think he's a first round pick.
No, that's where it would shock me if he did go in the first round. If he was one of 5 or 6 that went in the first round, that would probably shock me.
Yeah, that'd be nuts.
Because I think so. He does have the talent, like I said. He's got a pretty decent arm. He can throw to all 3 levels. Like, he's good, short, medium, long. Like, he can do all of that. He's actually quite mobile. Yep. I can't even say it. My mouth isn't working.
Depends if you want to sound American or not. You can be like mobile.
Mobile.
The Australian way. He is quite mobile.
Yes, that's the word. But I think where he falls down is, I think maybe this is his. If anyone actually used to watch the Netflix, the quarterback show that they did, where they followed guys in high school. So Spencer Rattler was one of these quarterbacks, and immaturity issues got him kicked off the team at the end. They wouldn't let him play the last game of the season. It never actually came out what it was that he did, but the school came out and they were like, you are not playing because of what you've just done. And it was never mentioned again what it was, and that sort of they moved on. So like I said, that was 16, 17, 18. So maturity, you hope that he's more mature now. But his consistency in his decision making, like, sometimes you just look at it and you go, that's a really smart decision. You throw that ball away, great. And then next time he's like, do you know what? I reckon if I'm falling backwards, if I just launch this, I can get Xavier Legette over the top here. If I just really heave, and you go, just do what you did 2 plays before, throw it out of bounds. Yeah. Just live to fight another day. It's just some of those things where you go, if you tune into the right game, the right Spencer Rattler game, you go, that guy's going in the first round of the NFL draft. And then you watch the next game and you're like, he's going to go undrafted. Like, what is going on here?
He needs to go back again. He's not done. Yeah. And look, and that's the thing. His stat line from the year, 3,186 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. That is not good. That is bad. 97 rushing attempts, 104 yards. So there also was not much rushing upside and scramble ability as well. But like, to your point, what you said, when he did make big time throws, they looked great. They looked really cool. A couple of games. And the other thing that doesn't work in his favor, I was saying, was the schedule. I've got it now. Opened with North Carolina. They lost against Drake May. Played Georgia, they lost. Tennessee, they lost. Florida was a tough game. They lost. Missouri, they lost. Texas A&M, they lost. And they finished with Clemson, which they lost. They did beat Kentucky and Mississippi State. You could point to as good games. And Mississippi State, he was 18 of 20 for 288 yards and 3 passing touchdowns, 8 rushes for 43 yards. So, I mean, it almost sounds like most of his production came in that one game in week 4. But outside of that, it was tough sledding for Spencer Rattler, especially in a year where you need to prove to the NFL that you're worthy of a high draft capital pick. It was never going to be easy.
No, and this is the thing. He's going to be. I reckon he's probably going to be one of those day 3 quarterbacks.
I think he might go undrafted now. I've gone over that, to be honest.
I think
he'll be picked. If Spencer Bennett can get picked, I think he can get picked.
See, to me, Spencer Rattler's one of those guys who someone's going to almost like an Aiden O'Connell was for the Raiders last year. It's like it's a 5th round pick. Look, if we have to throw him into a game, we'll throw him into a few games and see what we've got, because you never know, something might hit. But
look, if he needs to be our starting quarterback going forward, so be it.
Yeah, it's sort of like you could see a team go, we do that, we chuck him out there, we see what we've got, if he's worth keeping on or not. Sort of maybe the Sam Howe type of thing, where he ends up with a team and there might be an injury just before the season starts, and they're like, you know what, you're our best backup that we've got. You've shown enough in preseason and training camp. We'll see how you go. Yeah, he's also the type of guy who gets drafted, and then, you know, if his immaturity issues that shown up in that early day, like the college, the quarterback show on Netflix, or the high school one, if some of that shows up, you could be like, and he's been cut before preseason starts. So it's one of those things. I reckon a team will take a chance on him, but I don't think it'll be before day 3.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened with my love for Malik Cunningham last season. Just gone, you know, it was like, oh my god, he's fallen to a really good spot on the Patriots. He could totally take that number 1 job. He had a really good preseason. It's like, okay, they want to kick him out to wide receiver. That's bad. It's like, oh no, they brought him into the game. That's good, and he's played really well. That's good. Oh, he might start a game during the season for him. That's good. And then it was like, nah, it's all falling apart. And I can see that happening for sure.
So yeah, so he's my 7.
Yeah, he was my 7 as well. So we're just about done here because we've blown way past time, as I knew we would. But I'll just list off the final 3 that I had. 8, I had Jordan Travis. 9, I had Michael Pratt. And 10, I had Joe Milton.
So I was 8 and 9 will be the same, but 10 I just had with Sam Hartman.
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually, now that you've mentioned, I think before the show that he is declared, I think I might put him in ahead of Joe Milton. I just don't really rate Joe Milton at all, but I understand he has a cult following.
Sam Hartman, I think, would be one of those, if he gets drafted. To me, Sam Hartman's going to be like a 6th, 7th rounder, if that. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe after Jordan Travis, the last couple of guys that end up being undrafted free agents.
The thing with Sam Hartman is, you know, I think he won't be a very high draft pick this coming draft. But, you know, if Mitchell Trubisky had never existed, I think he probably would have stood a fairly good chance. I just think he's got a lot of those elements and qualities where, you know, I was so high on him. I had him at 3 going into the season because I saw him at Wake Forest, and I was like, holy shit, this guy is good, man. This guy's really good. Let's get him on a proper team. And he went to Notre Dame, and I was like, okay, let's see what he can do. And it was very hit and miss. That game against Clemson was spectacular, but it was a spectacle and probably nothing more than that. And so I just think he really hurt his draft stock this year. Michael Pratt sort of took a team into a lane that was like, sort of like fairly okay, and he sort of made them very good. I think that he is like the perfect sort of like Aiden O'Connell type that you talked about, like going to be probably a day 3 pick, and he'll be a very neat sort of backup, cap saving backup on a team as well. And then Jordan Travis, he to me is the most polarizing out of all of these quarterbacks here because he was amazing at Florida State. Now, he was amazing for just that season just gone, but what he did was truly incredible. He didn't really showcase those like elite arm throwing abilities like we've just talked about in all these other quarterbacks. You know, he's like can rush the ball, but he's sort of like not to the same extent. Same with scrambling and plays back down, but he was like he was still very, very good. So I'm going to be interested to see where he goes. But that injury is a huge blow.
Yeah, I said after Jordan Travis, the rest of the guys might actually go undrafted, but Jordan Travis could potentially go undrafted as well, based off of that injury alone. I think, those last couple of guys could end up being or potentially they could all end up being undrafted free agents or very late picks. Just thinking of you were saying of Pratt, Hartman, these are the guys actually just to me remind me a bit of Tyson Bagent from this year. Was an undrafted free agent, undrafted free agent, latched onto a team in training camp, did well enough to become the backup, and then there was an injury, and he played 4 games, I think it was in the end, with Justin Fields' injury.
The only thing with Tyson Bagent was he went to a small school. It wasn't even an FBS school.
Yeah, he went to Shepherd University.
So I think at least I think Sam Hartman has that name brand value.
Yeah, but they're to me, they could be those types of guys though. In that process of going, okay, they might not get drafted, but they could end up on a team for that reason. Where it's like, hey, you did well enough in camp, and you've shown us enough, and now we're not worrying about a guy like a Jaron Hall or a PJ Walker or someone like that to be our backup. Right. You've shown enough in camp that you could be our second or third quarterback that we have here, and then suddenly you get to few games into the season, quarterback goes down with a broken finger and is out 3 games, and then he gets inserted into the starting lineup, does okay, and ends up being a career backup for how his NFL career plays out. So a lot of intrigue going in with these quarterbacks.
It's going to be amazing to see. And like I was saying at the top of the show, we're going to be back after the NFL draft, basically the week after the NFL draft. We're going to see where all these quarterbacks landed, and we're going to talk about how those landing spots have impacted our rankings of them and where we see them going as far as like how they project for preseason and into the NFL, and as well as potentially in a fantasy space if we sort of have the time there. But that's going to do it for this show. It is good to be back, Bradley, I have to say.
It's been fun, mate. And like I said, this is show number 1 back, and we've got some real fun ones coming out. Season 2.
That's the thing.
But we've got some fun ones coming up. We, like I said, quarterbacks are fun, but we better set aside 3 hours for the wide receiver show at least, because we could spend with the amount of guys that are coming out in this. This could be a 4-day podcast between just for the wide receivers. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out that I don't think you really want to miss.
I think we will probably do like a part 1 and 2 for the wide receivers. Not so much for the running backs, I will say. And that's what's coming up next. That'll probably be a quicker show than this. But having said that, I think I actually broke down my top 10 running backs, and they are all worth talking about. So I will say that.
We'll just try and make sure that we're not 25 minutes per running back, as we sort of ended up with some of the quarterbacks today.
But they're worth talking about. Okay, You can follow Brad on Twitter at BradBolt1. You can follow me on Twitter as well at John Lloyd Roberts. And didn't mention this at the top of the show, but follow NFL Network as well on Twitter. We'll be back, like I was saying, with the running backs in 2 weeks. But in the meantime, you'll probably catch us on Brad's show. Have you done any programming?
Not yet. We've sort of been... we've had a few technical issues with people, and we're trying to plan some shows out. We've got some guests in the works, but being international, it's really quite hard to get time zones right and planning and everything, because they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm good to go Thursday," and then you go, "Wait, Thursday your time, or is it Thursday my time?" So it's you sort of end up a bit there. But no, we will have some good guests. Hopefully have 1, maybe 2, I guess you could consider them draft experts, draft people who work on shows and stuff. So that will pair in well with what we're doing here. But I think too, what you might end up seeing is throughout this draft season, myself, John, Dan, potentially we might all just end up doing some pretty short videos that we might end up posting to YouTube of some of the draft prospects.
I was thinking of doing that. I am thinking of doing some solo, just like player evaluations, which could be cool as well. But you've got me hyped, that's for sure, Brad. I'm excited to see what happens there. If you're still watching us on YouTube as well, please like and subscribe because that really, really helps us out. And once we get some sponsors, we'll appreciate that too. So enjoy the weekend ahead. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next week. Goodbye for now. Thank you.